Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Foresight TV. I am so glad you are here this Friday. I started to say Friday morning. It's morning for me, but I know that's not true for a lot of you. I know that Foresight's not the place for everybody in senior living, but if you are committed to making senior living great for residents, team members, and family members, so are we, and I'm glad you are here. First off, I'd love to say love to hear from you about what you're doing to improve the lives of residents and team members. If you've got a story, something we'd be talking about, we should be writing about, or we should have you as a guest on either Foresight TV or Tech Tuesday, I would love to hear about that. The other thing is if there's something that we should be talking about that we're not, or I guess if there's something we're talking too much about, you think, we'd love to hear about how we can serve you better. We produce lots and lots of great thought leadership content in addition to Foresight TV. We've got LinkedIn posts, we've got the Foresight podcast, Tech Tuesday. The most impactful thing we do is the Foresight website, where we publish new leadership content every single day. It's free. It's easy to subscribe to. You can see the QR code up on the screen. So you just grab that phone, take a picture of it, or do the thing with it, and fill out your email and your name, and you are good to go. There's also a link in the chat. The other thing I want to talk to you about is that we know that every leader wants to have a great workplace culture, but it's actually really, really hard to do, and it feels even impossible. Part of the problem is that you don't know what to do. People talk about big ideas and way to think about things, but what's really important is the things that you do, the activities that you do, and there's so many great things that you can do to have a better culture. So we have launched a new product called Practical Passionate Leadership. It's on Substack. Takes me back to my roots. There's a QR code up for that. There's some free content there. The really good stuff is a premium content for the amazing bargain of $8 a month or $80 a year. You will get at least two things that you can do as a leader every month to make your culture better, to make it so that people love coming to work. So I hope you check it out, and we're going to get started just right after this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Ben, welcome to Foresight TV. I'm so glad you could join us. This is you did or part of a presentation at the Interface West conference in Los Angeles a couple months ago, and you started talking about modular construction in senior living. And I've been watching this company, Boxable. You're probably familiar with them. They've got they're doing some modular stuff. I don't know what they're doing, senior living kinds of things, but I'm just really, really intrigued by it. But I want to start with this. Tell us like the two or three most important things we need to know about who you are.
About who I am. Okay.
Yeah, about who you are, what you're passionate about. And I'm hoping it's in senior living and not like horse racing or something, but maybe that too.
Yeah, well, I went to the races a few times when I was a kid, but we're not here to talk about that. So
Okay.
I'll certainly talk more professionally about senior living. So yeah, I'm Ben Seagar with KTGY Architects. We have 7 offices across the country. I sit here in Irvine, California, and I lead our senior living studio for the office. So that's anything from independent living to assisted living to memory care. I'll touch those. And I've been doing that since 2017. So for the last 8 years, I've been solely devoted to senior living. And, you asked why I'm passionate about it. I think it really started when I was a young kid. I had a grandmother who came and lived right next door to us. We had a duplex, my parents, and I would go visit her all the time. It was just so easy. We'd watch Jeopardy together, Wheel of Fortune together when I was done with my homework, and we just hang out and have a good time. But as she needed more care, she had to go to an assisted living facility, and I say facility on purpose. So it was a facility, not a community. And it was like 3 blocks from our house. And I think I can count on one hand how many times I visited her. And it was just because it was depressing, like when I walked in, it was just like dark and sterile and institutional feeling, and it was everything that senior living shouldn't be. And I didn't know it at the time, but that maybe kind of piqued my interest. And man, there's got to be a better way. And obviously there is, as we all know. So,
Yeah.
um,
So I love this. And before we get into the modular housing, which I want to spend some time on, I have to ask you a question. So I'm reading a leadership book right now, and they're in this book. They're talking about the first Mars rovers that they sent up, and this team of academics who had to build this thing, and they had it all designed. And then the rocket, the spaceship people came back and said, "Hey, this is not going to work. You don't have as much space. We don't have as much weight as you need." And they tried to figure out how to fix it. And finally, it became clear that they actually had to redesign it from scratch. And in redesigning it from scratch, they created a brand new model. Obviously, it still had wheels like the old one, and still had solar panels like the old one, but it was really a brand new design. And it turned out that it far exceeded the expectations. It lasted for a number of years, did like 100 times more distance than it thought. They only thought it was going to get 1,000 feet or 1,200 feet from the landing vehicle, and it ultimately traveled 28 miles. And so I got to thinking about it. What would it be like if we could actually, I mean, senior living today is sort of an evolution of, developers and architects and operators look at the last thing that was built and the things that were built 100 years ago, and they say, "Oh, we can do it better." But what if do you have any thoughts on what it would be like if we said, we're going to start with a brand new sheet of paper, and we're going to go out and we're talk to residents who are living in them? Maybe we're going to go talk to older people who said, "No, I don't want to live in senior living." We're going to talk to team members to say what actually works and what doesn't. You have any thoughts about what that might look like? I know that's a long way to ask a question.
yeah, no, it's a good question. And I think that you kind of answered the question partially by saying talk to residents and talk to seniors who maybe aren't moving in for certain reasons. But I think as designers and as operators, we try to, we might not say it explicitly, but we try to affect the behavior of the residents in the spaces that we design. It's almost like a if they build it or if we build it, they will come type of thing. So we're building spaces that maybe the residents don't really want. And we're like, well, these residents should want it. They should want to hang out in this lounge, or we should build this library because they should want to go sit there and read. And really, we need to be listening to them and saying, what spaces do you really want? What would you use? And I think it's just kind of shifting the mindset a little bit. And we've been building, and I use libraries as an example. We've been building them in senior living for so long. Um, in certain communities they do well, but in most of them they just sit empty all day, and we don't change the behavior of the residents and force them to go there. So, yeah, I think really just doing some research on exactly what those residents want is the great first step.
Yeah, well, I can't remember whether it was the panel that you were on or a different panel, but one of the questions that was asked, it was designers and architects, and the question was asked is, what's the space that gets built that shouldn't get built? And I was so fascinated by it, and I think that pretty much everybody said it was the theaters.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I actually remember that. I was on that panel and I was moderating. So I asked the question. I didn't have to answer it, which is always kind of nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think all the way down the line, it was the theater. And I mean, we're working on a project that's kind of close to Hollywood right now. And they think the demographic's going to be some old people that worked in the movie industry that are retired now. And a theater might make sense in that community, but maybe not in all of them.
Yeah, I've been to the motion picture television fun home up in the valley in the San Fernando Valley. No, it's actually in the San
Yeah,
Fernando
San
Valley,
Fernando.
right?
Yeah.
And just sort of orienting for other people. So it's sort of north of Hollywood, north of Los Angeles, and they have a theater there that they use a lot. But again, they're mostly entertainment people who are there, so it makes a lot of sense. So anyway, okay, so let's get to modular construction. I know that there are a few companies that are doing it. Until the presentation there, you talking about it, I actually wasn't aware that anybody was doing it in senior living. And so maybe we ought to start by just doing a sort of a primer on what modular construction is, why people are doing it.
Yeah. So I may have misled you a little bit during that panel. We're doing a ton of modular housing. We have a ton on the boards. It's mostly multifamily. It's not a
Okay.
lot of senior living right now, but I think it would be great for senior living, which is why I'm talking to you today and why I presented it at the conference. So, when we started modular as KTGY, it was back in 2016 was our first project, and it was an affordable housing project, and it was actually shipping containers. Um, so it was metal shipping containers that we brought in and craned in and put them on site, after fixing them up and everything. And we learned quickly that's way too expensive. They put all these chemicals on them when they come across the ocean. You need to do all this remediation. It just didn't work. So our future modular projects have been containers or modules purpose built for housing, both wood and steel. And the reason why I think it would be, well, how long do you have? I guess there's a lot of reasons why I think it would be great for senior living, but a lot of it I'll talk mostly assisted living memory care right now. Um, the units are so repetitive. I mean, we have a lot of studios, a lot of one bedrooms, and it's the same unit over and over and over again for the most part. And it's so efficient to make modules, especially when the units are designed on a module anyway. They're usually 8-foot modules, 16 wide studios, 24 wide one bedrooms. You can start just doing math and figuring out how this building can go together.
So does it? I guess the first question is so actually let's talk a little. I've got so many questions about this, but let's talk a little bit about the what the process would look like. So a developer would go out and buy a piece of land, and they'd come to you and say, "I heard you on Foresight TV." Talking about this modular thing, and I think it's time to give it a go. What would that process sort of look like?
Yeah, so the most important thing is just what you said. They know they want to do modular from day one. It's really important to plan it from the beginning, especially because these modules, they can get 65 feet long. So they can go from exterior wall to exterior wall, double loaded, corridor in the middle. So you can go all the way across the building with one module. If you don't line that up properly from day one, then you're going to be redesigning. So yeah, first thing, knowing that you're going to do it. Um, but I would ask some questions about what their goals are for the project, how many units, how tall they want to go, what the zoning is, because it's not going to make sense for every single project. I think, site built still makes sense on certain projects, but where the where the module really makes sense again is assisted living memory care. Um, it'll cut some time off the schedule. We're usually seeing about 20% time savings. Um, Not a lot of cost savings though, unless you go taller, which I can get into if you want. But it's mostly time savings, and then it can lead to some complications if you don't know what you're doing because it's very unique in the way that the construction goes together.
So the I guess the couple questions I have is um, paint me a scenario where you would go to a developer and say this would be an ideal project to do modular.
Okay, perfect question. Here's a scenario. The scenario is, so I said we get 20% time savings, no cost savings. That no cost savings is based on wood frame construction, type 5. Now, in the IBC and CBC, you can only go 3 stories um, in a senior living occupancy, R2.1 or I1 condition 2. Now I'm getting into nerdy architecture talk, but you can only go 3 stories in wood. So if you want to go 4, 5, 6 stories, you got to do concrete or steel or something non-combustible. The cost of construction goes through the roof. Um, with modular construction, you can do steel modular for about the same price as wood modular, which is about the same price as stick frame. So all of a sudden, you're going from 3 stories to 5 stories, whereas site built, you would pay that premium for the non-combustible construction. At modular, you're really paying much closer to the type 5 stick frame price. So there's no cost savings when you're comparing apples to apples, but when you're comparing, 3 stories to 5 stories, there's a ton of cost savings.
Oh yeah, I mean it becomes huge, right? And from a revenue standpoint. So when you talk about modular, I kind of and I don't know whether this is accurate or not. I actually think I may be completely wrong about this, but somehow, and I don't even know where this comes from, but somehow I equate modular with low income, basic, not luxury. Is that just wrong thinking, or would that be accurate?
That's a really, really common misconception. I think a lot of people, when they think modular, they think, mobile home parks and things
Yeah.
like that. That's not what this is because they're built in the factory. You can put, as nice or as cheap finishes in there as you want, countertops, whatever. You can quarry tile from Italy if you want and bring them in and put them in modules. So they can be really nice. They can be really high end. Sometimes we had a project, a multifamily project a couple years ago where, the walk-in closet, we just specified a regular shelf and pole, and the modular guy calls us up and says, "Hey, we already have all this millwork on the line ready to go. It would actually be cheaper to do built-in casework in this walk-in closet than the shelf and pole." So that's an example of actually, kind of a happy accident, but where you're getting nicer finishes, in this case in the walk-in closet, than you would typically.
Okay, so I go out and I build this modular senior living community, and I get ready to sell this thing to customers. Are they going to tell? Are they going to be able to tell that it was modular? Is it going to make it better, worse, or is it no? It's going to be like this. Nobody knows.
It'll be like this, nobody knows. If it's built well, if you have the right team, if you have the right contractor, it's going to look just the same. Um, and we say modular, the way I envision this, the units are all modular. A lot of the amenities and back of house spaces and kitchens and stuff like that is going to be site built still, just because they don't fit cleanly into the modular. It doesn't make sense. So and that's really where the time savings is, because you're doing all the site built stuff at the exact same time as you're starting to build the modules in the factory, and then they kind of come together. So modular for the units, not for the entire building.
Okay, gotcha. So what would happen is you would build using traditional techniques on the first floor for first and maybe even second floor for common areas and back of the house offices and dining and that kind of thing, and then the modulars would go on top. And do these get delivered as single complete units, or are they like 4 units across and then they get bolted together to become a functional housing unit?
Yeah, the delivery is a whole topic and a whole logistical puzzle to solve on its own. We typically don't go wider than 12 feet on the modules, just because of transportation reasons. And if you get wider than that, usually you need like an escort vehicle, and it becomes really expensive because you got like the flag truck behind and the flag truck in front and the actual module. And so you want to keep it to whatever the jurisdiction. You need to map out the path. If you're
Uh-huh.
going on the freeway, then it's state jurisdiction. Then you get into the local jurisdiction and figure out how wide everything can be. And it's all, Department of Transportation stuff. But usually 12 feet's a good starting point. Um, so yeah, that's a long way of saying you're not going to get one unit and one module. You're going to have to bolt them together, and that's a specialty contractor actually. You need someone that knows what they're doing, so it looks like it's one piece and hasn't been kind of Frankenstein together.
And where do these things get built? I got to ask that. I mean, does that have a factor? If I'm in Los Angeles, is it better than being in, I don't know, Missoula, Montana?
Yeah, absolutely, because shipping these things, there's a cost associated with that, whether on a train, on a truck, on both. So the closer you are to the manufacturing plants, the better it is. So yeah, a place like Los Angeles, there's a lot in Southern California, there's a lot in Northern California. Some are coming from abroad, Mexico, China, Eastern Europe, but most of what we're doing is domestic. And in California, I mean, I sit in California, so we do most of our work here.
Right.
So yeah, it helps to be near a factory, and there's a lot of factories out there, but not a lot of them that I would actually use, because you want someone with a track record of being able to deliver. Because I think a new one pops up and goes out of business almost every day. It seems like.
So I gotta back up on something you said. You talk about getting them built overseas. Does that? Let's put the tariff issues that may or may not be there aside. But like I've got a friend right now who I just on Facebook that I saw has just drove their motorhome down to Mexico to get it repainted because it would save them. I don't know, they're going to get it for 30% of the cost. And so is that a way to maybe, can I go get my modular built in Mexico and have it trucked to the US and save tons of money?
Yeah, and, well, I don't know about tons of money, but it's common. Like Mexico's a common place to have them built. It does. There are some logistical issues with inspections because the state oversees the plan check process and the inspection process for everything built in a factory, whereas the local jurisdiction oversees that process for everything built on site. So you're kind of doing two submittals and you have two sets of inspectors. So now if you're building them in Mexico, you got to figure out, man, I need that inspector from HCD from the state of California or whatever to be in that factory inspecting how they're built. So now am I like paying for vacation for that guy to go down there? Like, how does that work? So there's, it's not quite as clean as just ordering from Mexico and having them come up, but yeah, it's common. I'm not sure that we've ever gotten them from Mexico, but I know a lot of modules come from there.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, and to me, it seems like this is the kind of thing that's only going to grow, become more popular, and yeah, I don't know. Do you foresee a time where 25% or 50% of senior living is built modular sometime in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I do, I do, and I'm just kind of thinking back to how much construction innovation we've had in the past 100 years. Um, it's still, people on site with 2x4s and hammers and nails or nail guns, and it's been that way forever. It's crazy how little innovation we've had in the industry of construction over the last number of decades. So I feel like this could be one of those innovations when it makes sense. Maybe not 50%, maybe 20%. But I definitely think there's a future for modular and senior living. Absolutely.
So what about so we get this senior living community built modular, we get it all set up, and now I've got to operate it. So two questions sort of relative to operating it. Does it make and there's always ongoing maintenance, right? Every community has got a maintenance person or more than one maintenance person who's maintaining this. Is the maintenance easier, harder? And what about sort of lifespan of the parts in terms of failures and those kinds of things and replacement?
Yeah. So in terms of maintenance and things like that, it should be indistinguishable from a site built building. Um, there are just by nature of how the modules are put together, there's potential weak spots for things like, waterproofing and flashing and, where they come together on the outside. You just need to make sure you have subs that know what they're doing and they're doing that waterproofing properly. Because if not, there can be some issues down the line in terms of lifespan. But if it's put together properly and people know what they're doing, these things are actually usually built to, I guess, a better specification because they're in the factory. The walls are perfectly square, the walls are perfectly straight. You can do that in the factory on the line, whereas in the field, it's a little bit harder. So I would say the quality is better what comes from the factory. If you have the people putting it together that are the right people, then in general the quality can be better.
So one of the other questions I have is again, thinking modular, I'm sort of thinking, well, this is going to look like a big box or maybe something that was built with Legos. Does it inhibit sort of the creativity and design and the I don't know, what's the best way to describe it? Maybe the wow factor of senior living community, which is so often important to owners and operators, developers.
It's a different challenge, right? That's a really good question because, I mean, by nature of the construction, it does tend to be boxy, but you can make some modules deeper than others to get offsets in the buildings. You can, site weld on cantilevered balconies for some of the units that need balconies. You can inset balconies into the modules. So there's games you can play, but yeah, you're going to be on that 12-foot, we'll call 12-foot module. So everything's going to move in and out of that 12 feet. You're not going to get like a 2-foot, bump here and 4 feet over here. It's going to be on that module, but there's certainly games you can play. It's just different type of challenge.
So could I do like what about like balconies? Could you do balconies with it? So could you like add on balconies or
Yeah, absolutely. So you can add on balconies, so they're fully cantilevered and they're like bolted and welded on. Or you can, at the end of the module, you can move that wall in and the balcony's inset into the module, but it's still outdoor covered space. So there's a couple ways to do it, but yeah, we can certainly get outdoor open space for the units.
so so has anybody actually done are you aware of anybody who's done modular senior living yet?
I want to be the first, Steve. No,
Oh man.
I'm
Okay.
not. We've done, a dozen projects at our company for different multifamily type of applications, but not for senior living. I'm kind of wondering why.
Yeah, so let's see if we can create a little ad for operators and developers right here. What's the why should they pick up the phone? Why should they send you an email and look at what's somebody looks at this and says, "Man, I had to think about doing this." What's the ideal kind of site they should look for? Maybe the sort of the type of marketplace community where it would be perfect.
Yeah, so to me, it's an infill site. It's near a large, if it's not in a large metropolitan area, it's near a large metropolitan area because that tends to be where the factories are. So you want it close to the factories, and then an infill site where the zoning allows you to go 4 to 6 stories somewhere in there, and that's what you want to do because as we discussed earlier, once you get in that 4 to 6 story range, that's where you're actually realizing cost savings, not just the time and schedule savings. So if there's a site like that and it's assisted living, memory care, no independent living, I mean, you could do it for independent living, but maybe not the first one. You want the first one to be a home run. So let's do the low hanging fruit. So yeah, infill, assisted living, memory care, 4 to 6 stories near a large metropolitan area. It seems like a no brainer to me.
So could I even, I'm trying to think about how you could really make this work. Could I go out and say, well, I want to, so I live in Citrus Heights, a suburb of Sacramento, and I go out and I say, I think there's a need for Citrus Heights for more memory care. And I don't think there actually is, but I just assume this for
Okay.
the case. Could I go out and say, okay, I'm going to go out and build 40 units in a factory, even though I don't know where my site is, knowing that I'm going to do this modular. So when I get it, it's like 6 months later, I've got a completed community, and then I'm going to go out and look for it. And I mean, 6 months is probably a little fast, but could you do something like that, or does it really need to be site specific?
Um, it needs to be site specific, and then from a schedule standpoint, it doesn't make sense to do it that way because if you build the modules before they're ready to get laid on the site, then you're going to be paying for storage, and all of a
Ah,
sudden any
got it.
cost savings that you may reap, they're just going to get eaten away at. So it's really a kind of logistical scheduling thing where you want the modules to start being ready right when the site's ready to receive them, because if they're too late, then the site's sitting waiting for them. If it's too early, you're paying to store them. So it's really it's really a scheduling issue.
Gotcha. And how long does it typically take to build modules?
Um, that's a really good question. I'm not sure exactly how long it takes to build them. I know like a full project, like a 4 story project over podium could get built in about 14 months, and
Mhm.
it takes like a month to 6 weeks to lay all the modules. So it's kind of cool actually. You have your podium, and then a month and a half later, you're topping out. Um,
Oh,
so that's my way of not answering your question because I'm not sure.
okay.
But
Okay. Great.
yeah, the whole process
Cool.
is nice.
Cool. Cool. So we're almost out of time, but I want to just sort of step back for a second from modular. As you look at senior living development construction right now, what are some things that are exciting you in terms of sort of innovation and that kind of thing?
I think this is kind of a cliche answer, but I think the technology and the AI capabilities, in terms of how these buildings can get operated and how care can be delivered to residents the best way is super exciting to me. I know that's not an architectural
Yeah.
excitement, but to me, that's the future, and that's how we're going to care for these residents and also help out our caretakers in the future. In terms of like architecture, I mean, ever since Nick came out with that missing middle survey, whenever that was, 7, 8 years ago now, it's been a topic of conversation in the industry, but people have just been kind of, talking about it because there's no good answers for it. Um, I've sensed, the last year or two, a little bit more of a groundswell of energy to really figure this out. As you know, the leading boomers are 80 this year,
Yep.
and getting ready to move in. So I think there could be hopefully some steps taken to help, serve this missing middle. I don't know what that is. Modular maybe could help a little bit in terms of construction costs, but really it's the cost of care that I think is driving all of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And I guess the thing that I don't know, I don't really see people talking too much about. Maybe they do sort of internally in the design world is, how do you build? Certainly, buildings have got to be built first to serve the needs of residents. But how do you build buildings so the workflows means that you've got, you can maximize the team you've got, right? And
Yeah,
so.
that's one thing I love about senior living design is, sorry if I cut you off, is
No, perfect. Yeah.
you're really designing for three end users. You're designing for
Yeah.
the resident, you're designing for the staff, and you're designing for the family of the resident. And you need to really design spaces that work for all of those people, or else the building's not going to be successful.
Cool. Ben, thank you very much. This has been a great conversation. I hope somebody watches this and reaches out and said, okay, let's go explore modular. I see so much of a unique opportunity just to make senior living better doing this. So thank you very much. If you're somebody who's thinking about building, reach out to Ben. He will help you walk through this process and create something amazing. I want to say thanks to Jada for producing in the background, and I hope you have a great weekend.
All right. Thank you for having me, Steve. It was fun.